Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome back to my channel, My Loverlies. If you've never been here before, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I am so happy you found me. I do so hope that you will like and subscribe before you leave. Become part of the Mama family. Mama's got your back, at least where makeup's concerned, and definitely when that makeup is cheap. Today is True Love Tuesday. Guys, I look forward to filming this video every single week. Today's story, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be so much fun. It's a story that we all know, but not really. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed researching it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy telling it while I tell you this epic love story. I'm going to be doing my makeup. This is the look that we're doing today. What do we think? Very bright, very vivid, very orange. And I love it. Super, super simple, guys. Like, I know that a lot of times I come on here and I do crazy cut creases and this and that and the other thing. This one is literally just the easiest thing. We're just going to build a gradient on the eye and do a really beautiful, colorful, glittery wing. You know, I'm all about that. High impact, low effort. That is what we stand for on this channel. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be using some of my Amazon pigments. I, of course, will list everything that I used in today's video in the description box below, along with the links to my other social medias, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. I always post finished pictures over on Instagram and Facebook. If you guys are not following me over there, you definitely should go do that. I post fun content every single day, and if you're following me everywhere, you don't have to worry about missing a single moment of it. But like I said, I'm just going to use some loose pigments today. I really enjoy working with loose pigments. Tip though for working with any kind of loose anything, when you put your eyeshadow primer on, don't set it with powder. Now, I never set my eyeshadow primer. It's just, I think it kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion, just because I want that tacky base. I want my eyeshadow to stick to that tacky base. But if you prefer to set your eye primers with powder of any kind, just don't do that when you're working with loose pigments like this, just because they don't have the binders and things like that in them, so they're gonna have a much harder time sticking to your lid. They're basically just gonna fall off if they don't have something sticky to grab onto. So just a tip, a word for the wise, I reckon. But we're gonna go ahead and dive in to today's story. We're talking about Bonnie and Clyde, y'all. I think this is one of those stories that we all kind of know about. We all know who Bonnie and Clyde are, right? These bad guy criminals, that just kind of like took their love affair and robbed banks. Like, there's a whole big thing, right? And Thelma and Louise is based off of that movie, or off of their story. Thelma and Louise is one of my absolute favorite movies. Love, 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 love. But it's just, we all think we kind of know this story, right? And actually, there is a lot more to it than I ever even thought there might be. So it's going to be super, super interesting. We're going to dive right into it. I'm going to start, so after years of robbing banks and killing policemen, they were notorious for policemen. They did not care. After years of doing whatever it was that they wanted, they were finally captured. We're going to get into that, but first I want to do a little bit of backstory both on Bonnie and Clyde. So Bonnie was born in Rowena, Texas. She was born in Rowena, Texas. She lived with her mom and two siblings. She didn't have a father to speak of. She dropped out of high school at 16 years old, and she dropped out of high school to marry a man named Ray Thornton, and she married him in 1926. But sadly, or I guess for the best, their marriage was really shortly lived, just because he was not a nice person. And the thing, pain, people in pain cause pain, right? It is so, so true. And neither one of them, unfortunately, had a very good upbringing. Just instantly, I want to say just neglected and abused from basically from the time they were brought into the world. So really, really sad backstories on both of them, honestly. So she married Ray in 1926, but they got divorced very shortly after. He was a criminal. He was just a bad guy. She definitely had a type. He was just a bad guy, and he was mean to her. He abused her both mentally and physically. Just was not a good situation. So she packed her bags. She got out of that situation. Yeah, she was married. She was born in 1911. Okay, so Clyde, he also grew up in Texas, but he grew up super, super poor. He grew up on his family's farm. He grew up on his family's farm, really, really poor. And he started his criminal career young, right? When you're poor, you know, it's oftentimes really easy to be bitter, right? About the fact that everybody else gets to have nice things and everybody else gets to enjoy life and this and that and the other thing. And jealousy is a big motivator, right? So he started stealing really, really young. He said, you know what? I can't pay for it. I'm just going to take it, right? So that's what he did. First getting arrested in 1926. Yeah, so he was arrested the first time the same year that Bonnie got married to Ray. I'll just put that together. First getting arrested in 1926 for failing to return a rental car. Rented a car, went out joyriding, and didn't want to give it back. So they locked him up. And even when he would work a legit job, because I do believe when he was younger, there might be somebody here. But even when he was younger, he did try to, I guess, walk the straight and narrow. I don't think it was for him, though. I don't think he thought it was for him. I think that he was very much into the instant gratification. And once you steal and realize how easy it is to just take things that you want, it's really hard to step back and work for them or pay for them. So he was like, nah, this straight edge life is not for me. I want to be a criminal. So that's what he did. And he got in trouble for stealing, breaking into safes, and eventually murder. So I don't know what is. I'm not monetized, so I don't think it really matters. I'm not sure what you can say or can't say on YouTube. But he eventually got arrested for the Big M. And he actually reportedly murdered the man. He made his first Big K while actually in lockup. And prisons are notorious for this. But he actually was SA'd. And he beat him to he was unalive. And that again is just, could you imagine? Like, I know it's a very, very, very touchy subject, and I don't really want to go there, but like, mad, right? Big mad, big mad, and beat this man to unalive, and actually, of course, got more time for that, but that was when he did his first M. So fast forward, somehow, some way, he gets out of prison and meets up with Bonnie, and that's where this love story starts. Now, even before they get together, and even before, even before the story really begins, you have to think about the fact that these are very sad, damaged, hurt people, right? I don't think that either one of them has really ever experienced love, or like genuine love, kindness, or affection, right? Just the absolute worst of the worst that humanity has to offer, and they've suffered through it. So they meet up together. So they meet, and of course, there's an instant connection, right? Because they both understand the pain, they both understand the trauma, they're both broken in pretty similar ways, and they basically just fall together, and the instant love was born, the instant connection, the instant tie high bond was bonded, right? When Clyde was released from prison in 1932, he continued his streak with robbing grocery stores and gas stations with Bonnie by his side. Soon they had an entire gang of criminals that assisted them in crimes with everything from stealing weapons to robbing banks. They were big on robbing banks. These people went through the money, honey. They knew how to spend some money. They really enjoyed partying. They enjoyed drinking and playing cards. And all of that stuff costs good money. So they ended up having to rob banks fairly regularly in order to continue to support their habits. Now, criminals assisted them in crimes like stealing. Okay. One weekend while Bonnie was visiting her mom in Dallas, because Bonnie did indeed keep in touch with her mother. I believe that both Bonnie and Clyde kept in touch with their mothers. I don't know so much about the fathers of both of them, but I do know that their mothers helped them quite a bit. A mother's love is oftentimes an unbreakable thing, right? And it doesn't matter how terrible of a person your child is. It doesn't mean that you're going to love them any less. So they both kept pretty good in touch with their mothers, and Bonnie actually went and visited her mother in Dallas pretty often. So yeah, Clyde, while she was visiting her mom in Dallas, Clyde and fellow gang members, Raymond Hamilton and Ross Dyer, were at a country dance in Oklahoma when they were approached by the town's sheriff and deputy. Now, this is the first incidence of them running into the law, right? And this does not go well. This does not go well at all. Clyde thought he was being threatened. I don't think that the sheriff or the deputy were threatening him in any way. I'm not even fully sure that they knew who he was at this point. But I do believe that Clyde had mental issues. And I do think that he was maybe either psychotic, or I think he was definitely psychotic. But I don't know if he was what exactly he had. But I do think that he kind of saw things that maybe weren't there sometimes. And in his brain thought that this sheriff and deputy were threatening him, so he opened fire, and in doing so ended up injuring many people. Oklahoma killed, yeah. He opened fire, so he unalived the deputy and badly wounded the sheriff. This was the first time he unalived a lawman, but definitely was not the last. He has a very, very long history of getting in gunfights with lawmen. But not the last. Okay, so then fast forward a little bit to 1932. So in 1932, they're still doing their thing, but they encounter a young man by the name of Jones. What was his name? W.D. Jones. And he kind of convinced Bonnie and Clyde to let him join their gang. And they do. I guess the more the merrier. But he kind of comes on board and things go downhill pretty quickly. Joined the gang, and on Christmas Day, Jones was not a good guy. He was not a good guy at all. And I think he was just as completely and totally rotten as Clyde was, because on Christmas Day, he unalived a young family man. He was out getting last-minute groceries and presents for his family, and just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and crossed paths with Jones. And Jones ended up unaliving him and stealing his car. Could you imagine? I mean, I don't even want to imagine. There's nothing about that situation that, I even want to put into a scenario. But on Christmas Day, no feelings, no compassion, no empathy, no nothing had no placed no value on life, right? completely and totally just lost cause. And on Christmas Day killed unalived a young father while stealing his car in Temple, Texas. And then 2 weeks later, he helped Clyde unalive a Tarrant County deputy sheriff by the name of Malcolm Davis. So this was the second lawman. After they had walked into a trap set to catch them. So by this time, the officials, the police, know exactly who these people are. They are on the lookout for them. By this time, they have garnered quite a reputation, and not a good one by any means. And they're actively being hunted by this point. And I think this is where everything just really amps up, right? This is where everything just, like, red zone, right? Everything is like alert, 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 because they're having to deal with the trauma and everything, right? On top of this added stress and anxiety of being hunted, right? Of being chased. And that never ends well. Never ends well. By 1933, Bonnie, Clyde, and the gang had set up a temporary hideout. They had set their temporary hideout up in Joplin, Mississippi. After being on the run and trying to find base, right, a home base, they finally settled in Joplin. And did they, could not keep a good thing going for nothing, right? Like I already said, they enjoyed partying, right? They enjoyed drinking and carousing and making noise, basically doing everything that they weren't supposed to be doing, and made such a ruckus that the neighbors actually ended up calling the police with noise complaints and things of the like. So once the police had been called and had gone out to investigate, they realized who they had on their hands. So, of course, they reform. They gather up the troops and they storm the house. They stormed the house, guys. And I don't know what it is about Bonnie and Clyde. I don't know if they were escape artists or if they were just incredibly lucky. But after their house, after their headquarters has been stormed, they actually managed to escape. They managed to escape Bonnie, Clyde, Jones, Clyde's brother, Butch. What was his name? Butch? Buck. They escaped. They opened fire on officials and fatally wounded 2 officers before escaping with minor injuries. Not even really, like, nobody got shot. Nobody's, like, really hurt. Somehow, like I said, super lucky. They managed to get out of there pretty much unscratched. That doesn't last forever, though. So while they managed to escape, they didn't get to grab all of their belongings. They didn't get to, like, it's not like they got to sit there and pack a bag. So, give me a minute, let me pack a bag, and then we'll skedaddle. No, that's not how it worked. So they ran out of there with their lives and the clothes on their back. That was pretty much it. And during the process, after the aftermath, or in the aftermath of this big shootout, the house is searched and they're kind of going through their belongings, right? And they had left weapons, tons and tons of guns, weapons, all kinds of stuff. They had left, of course, all of their clothes. And among all of the litter, basically, was a camera. And inside this camera was a roll of undeveloped film. Now, this roll of undeveloped film actually was pretty much their undoing, right? Because in these pictures, there's pictures of Bonnie, there's pictures of Clyde, but there's also pictures of every single member of their gang. So where they were kind of operating on a little bit of anonymity. I think that's how you say that word. They didn't exactly know who was in the gang. But with these pictures, bullseye, right? They know exactly who they're looking for now. Somehow, this roll of film landed in the hands of the media, Pics were published by the Joplin Globe. So now not only do the police know, and not only can the police identify almost every single person in this gang, but now the public can too, because it's been released. It is public knowledge. And, you know, they ate that stuff up. Because, you know, as much as they are hated, they're also they're like celebrities, right? Not a lot of super interesting stuff happened back in the day. And people, just like now, people back then really, really loved to gossip. And who better to talk about than Bonnie and Clyde? So everybody's getting these newspapers. Everybody's looking at these pictures, and guys, the jig is pretty much up. We know who you are. We know what you look like. You're not in a good position. Okay, so while on the run, they left all of their belongings. They didn't pack any clothes. They have no food. They have no weapons. So they have to like restock all of that stuff, right? So in the process of them fleeing from the popo, they need money. Right? They need money. They need to fund their lifestyle. They need to eat, right? So in the process of fleeing, they rob bank after bank after bank. During this time, they would also kidnap their robbery victims. Now, this was something I thought was super, super interesting, right? So they would go into these banks. They would obviously rob it, but they would also kidnap. They would take hostages, right? And they would take hostages to ensure that they could get away and that the police wouldn't shoot at them or anything like that. Now, you assume that because these people are absolutely rotten to the core, that by the time that they had gotten away and weren't being chased anymore, that the hostages would have no more value and they would unalive them. I thought this was the only nice piece of information that I was able to really read about them. So they wouldn't harm their hostages. They never shot or killed or unalived a single pedestrian, right? The only people they really ever hurt were policemen, right? People that were actively trying to capture or threaten them. But innocent bystanders and, like I said, the hostages and things like that, they never hurt. They never touched a hair on their head. They would drop them off really, really far from the scene of the crime. And a lot of times they would either leave them with food and money for a payphone, or they would actually pay them for their trouble. In most cases, they actually left the hostages when they were dropped off. They left the hostages with a little bit of money, which I thought was just like kind of like honor among thieves, I guess. I guess that's what that is, because, you would assume that it would be probably a little bit easier to just, not deal with them, just kind of do what the worst thing possible and not have to bother with him anymore. But the fact that they just kind of dropped him off, gave him money, said, here's for your trouble, and just sent them on their merry way, I was like, they must not have been 100% completely all bad, right? Because if they were truly all bad, they definitely wouldn't have just dropped the passengers or the hostages off and just been like, all right, have a great day. So I thought that was something nice to note. With their photos now in the public eye, they had to lay low, and they were used to staying at brothels and hotels and motels and really just kind of living that life and partying it up and things like that. But with their pictures and stuff now in the newspapers and people recognizing them, they were no longer able to do things like that. They were no longer able to check into a hotel. They were no longer able to basically live any kind of have any kind of quality of life, right? They couldn't be around people, so they had to hide. They had to lay low, and this led to quite a few problems for them. So like I said, the police getting a hold of that camera was literally the worst thing that could have happened for them. They had to lay low and avoid staying in motels or even eating at restaurants. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, they couldn't go into a restaurant. It's not like they had drive-thrus back then, right? Everything was like diners. You had to go in, you had to sit down, order your food and eat, right? They can't do that. They can't risk somebody recognizing them. So in June of 1933, Bonnie, Clyde, and Jones were driving in Wellington, Texas, when they were involved in a serious car crash. Now, this was bad news for Bonnie. I think that Clyde was pretty much unscathed. I know that he walked away from the incident. Bonnie, Clyde, and Jones were driving in Wellington, Texas when they had the car accident. Bonnie ended up with terrible third-degree burns all over her right leg. They were actually so severe that she actually was never able to really walk again. The burns, and of course, they couldn't go to the hospital. They couldn't go seek medical attention. And third-degree burns are serious business, y'all. Like, there was no playing around. I think she's pretty lucky, actually, because this is pretty much towards the end of their story. And she didn't really have to suffer all that much longer. But the sheer amount of pain that this woman was probably in during the last few months of her life probably had to have been immense, right? Was definitely immense. So, oh my goodness, I'm out of Q-tips. So third-degree burns all over her right leg. She is never able to walk. She's never able to walk again, right? And luckily, like I said, the story's coming to an end. So hurt, tired, and incredibly desperate, they tried to check into a cabin in Missouri. And this was not a good choice, right? But they're out of choices, really. They're out of options at this moment. She's hurt. She can't do anything. She can't continue to run in the state that she's in. And if Clyde hadn't really loved her or hadn't really been invested in her, I guess that he probably could have dropped her off somewhere and gone his own way. But that is not what they did. Clyde stood by Bonnie until the very bitter end. So they're trying to regroup and heal and rest up a little bit. So they try to check in to this cabin in Missouri. And again, this did not go well. This probably was honestly the last thing that they should have been doing. But again, out of options. So, they check in, but they were nearly caught again. Again, they escaped, but just narrowly. And this time, they got out with more than scratches. The group of 5 escaped with severe injuries, including a massive head wound to Buck's head, skull, right? Basically got shot in the head, right? Could you imagine? And obviously, it didn't kill him, but wounded him severely. So you've got Clyde, Bonnie, Jones, Buck, and his wife, right? And Bonnie can't walk. She's burned and scarred, and Buck's been shot in the head. So they're basically having to drag there are 2 people around who can't basically take care of themselves, right? So things just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse from here. I had something in my mouth. Okay. So including a massive head wound to Buck's skull. After being on the run for 5 more days. They only made it 5 more days. And after the 5 more days, they stopped to camp in Dexter, Iowa. And again, they thought that this was a safe option. They're in the woods. They're at a campground. They're hoping that no one is going to recognize them. Because, again, they're very, very much out of options. And they have 2 incredibly injured companions, right? They've got to stop. They've got to rest. They stopped to camp in Dexter, Iowa, but were quickly surrounded again. I don't think they're already caught at this point, basically. They're already caught at this point. They're just prolonging the inevitable. They have managed to escape multiple times, but just barely. And eventually, all of those horrible things that they've done have got to catch up to them, and they do. So, again, they get quickly surrounded at this campsite, and they were quickly surrounded because, like I said, they're incredibly injured, right? And the only reason they were captured again is because the locals at the campground noticed Buck, and they noticed his bloody wounds, and they noticed his head wound, right? And they basically were concerned and was like, something's fishy here, and called the authorities. They were quickly surrounded, and they came under fire. Again, another gunfight, right? But somehow, miraculously, Bonnie, Clyde, and Jones escaped, right? So I think that they pretty much sacrificed Buck and his wife. Buck has a serious head wound at this time and is probably going, it probably doesn't have long anyway. And Buck's wife obviously must have been incredibly devoted to him because she stayed with her husband. And Buck was shot again. His wife, whose name was Blanche, she was arrested, and I actually saw a picture of her being arrested, and she looked like a wildcat. You could tell she was like fighting and kicking and screaming, and really just not impressed by anything that was going on. And Buck, she was arrested and Buck was captured. Buck, like I said, didn't have very long anyway, and he actually ended up passing away 5 days later while in custody. So again, Bonnie and Clyde and Jones have managed to escape one last time. One last time, they were lucky, one last time, but it's going to catch up to them right here because they didn't get far. Look how pretty that is. Okay, so they didn't get far. Bonnie and Clyde were eventually ambushed on a rural road in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. So I think at this point they had kind of split up with Jones, hoping that if they split up, they'd be less noticeable or they would have a bigger chance of kind of being inconspicuous. Because again, the authorities are looking for 3 people traveling together. So I think they split up a little bit. Didn't help them too awful much, though. They were ambushed on a rural road in Louisiana where they were shot and unalived in their Ford V8 by a group of Texas Rangers. Y'all, we already know. We don't mess with Texas Rangers, right? Who is that? Walker, Texas Ranger. Y'all ever seen that show? Chuck Norris. That's who I'm thinking of. Chuck Norris. They were caught by a group of Chuck Norrises, okay? And this was not a quiet surrender, right? Bonnie and Clyde were in it for the long haul. There was no surrender for them. There was no giving up. They were done, right? And on top of that, Bonnie probably didn't have too much longer anyway. Like I said, she had 3rd-degree burns all over her right leg and had never received any kind of medical attention. So I am positive that she probably had a killer infection and probably wasn't doing very well either. And at this point, I think Clyde is basically just at the end of his rope. He knows that the jig is up. He knows that there's nothing left to do but the thing, right? So they don't give up. Their last hurrah, they open fire on the Texas Rangers. The Rangers return fire, and they actually end up firing over 130 times they fire into this vehicle. Now, Bonnie and Clyde drove a really distinctive. Was their kind of like their prize possession. They had this Ford V8, and they were in it till the end, and they were shot nearly 130 times. When they were taken in to see the Undertaker and taken to the morgue to be embalmed and things like that, the Undertaker actually said that it was incredibly difficult to embalm them because they had so many bullet holes that it was incredibly difficult to actually do what he needed to do. And then in the autopsy report, it states that each one, both Bonnie and Clyde, each were riddled with at least 50 wounds, 50 bullet holes in each body. That's insane. I mean, it is an absolute epic way to go. An epic way to go for a really, really epic couple. And you know, there were people, like I said, they were never horrible to the common man, right? To pedestrians, right? So as much as they were terrible people, they were also kind of like celebrities when it came to, you know, the common man, right? I think at some point in life, right, we've all fantasized about what would it be like to rob a bank, right? What would it be like to be able to just do whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, and not really have to follow the rules. We've all thought about that at one point or another. And I think in a time when there was really, you know, really not a lot to look forward to, I think that if nothing else, they definitely were interesting, right? And they were celebrities. They were celebrities. So when it came time for both Bonnie and Clyde to be buried, there were thousands and thousands of people that showed up to their funerals. Now, Bonnie did have a form of a will that she had left with her family, and in this will, she had asked to be buried beside Clyde, and this was a no-go. Bonnie's mother refused. She refused to bury her daughter beside the man that had corrupted her, basically. So Bonnie was buried. They were buried very, very far apart. But she was actually exhumed, I think 40 years later, or a couple of years later. Bonnie requested to be buried with Clyde, but was denied. She was moved in 1945. So the day they were caught on May 23rd, 1934. That was the day that they were captured and unalived. And in 1945, she still wasn't moved to be buried beside Clyde, but she was moved quite a bit closer to him. She was actually moved to Dallas, Texas, a little bit closer. So there were nearly 20,000 people that attended Bonnie's funeral alone, because they did have separate funerals, but 20,000 people at Bonnie's funeral alone. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people, right? So you would think that the story would be done. They're gone, right? The game is over, and they've met their just end. But no. They're still causing all kinds of grief, even after they're in the grave, because the authorities are not done yet. They're not done yet. They didn't get to prosecute or press charges. No one kind of took the blame for all of the bank robberies and all of the destruction that these people caused, right? Somebody needs to take the blame. So they go after Bonnie and Clyde's family, their friends, their associates, anyone that had ever really talked to them. In total, they actually prosecuted 23 people. So 23 people, after Bonnie and Clyde were laid to rest, were actually charged and convicted of aiding and abetting or something of that, you know, something of the sort. 23 people. So I guess that seems like maybe enough people to kind of, take a little bit of the blame. But honestly, I don't think that was fair. I don't think that all 23 of those people really honestly deserved the punishment that they received. I just think that the authorities were looking for somebody to blame at least some of the destruction on, and they found them. And not only that, but among the 23 people were both Bonnie and Clyde's mothers. They both received jail time. They both were found guilty for harboring a criminal. and did jail time. Guys, that is the end of today's video. Let me know what you thought. I thought this was a super interesting video. You know, we kind of romanticized Bonnie and Clyde a little bit. I know in like Thelma and Louise and things like that. I always thought it would be so much fun, you know? It just seemed fun. Not like I'd ever do it, but it just seemed fun. I absolutely loved the movie. But I think the reality is definitely a lot more stark and not quite as romantic as the movies have led us to believe. They were not nice people. They did not do nice things. And I think that they just needed love. They just needed somebody to tell them that it was okay and that they weren't worthless, you know? I think that they had childhood trauma and they just let that eat them from the inside out. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I didn't finish the look, but that we're basically there. I'm going to add a little bit of mascara and a little bit of an orange wing. I will, of course, list everything in the description box below, along with the tags to my other socials. You guys already heard the spiel. But I will have the tags and all of the ingredients for today's look in the description box. As always, no filters, no edits, no fancy lighting. It's just me sitting here playing with some makeup, hoping you guys are enjoying what I'm doing. And until next time, my beautiful, amazing, loverly mamas, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and remember, you're important. Bye.